London, November 1965, 3:47 p.m. The underground tunnel at Leicester Square station was crowded. Rush hour beginning, people streaming past, briefcases, newspapers, the collective exhaustion of a Tuesday afternoon. Everyone in a hurry, everyone focused on getting home, getting away, getting anywhere but here. A young man sat against the tiled wall, 23 years old, guitar across his lap, open case in front of him with maybe 2 pounds inside. Enough for dinner, not enough to matter. He was playing, not for the crowd, for himself, because music was the only thing that made the underground feel less like a tomb, less like failure, less like the place where dreams went to die. He was playing a Beatles song, one of the early ones, simple, beautiful, the kind that reminded him why he'd wanted to be a musician in the first place, before the rejections, before the closed doors, before he'd ended up here, in a subway tunnel, playing for coins, for strangers who didn't care. 4 men in suits walked through the tunnel, coming from a business meeting, talking quietly, not paying attention to the musician, not paying attention to anything except getting to their next destination, just like everyone else. Then one of them stopped, mid-step, froze, listened, really listened, to the song, to the voice, to the way this street musician was playing their song. Paul McCartney turned to John, didn't say anything, just gestured. Listen. John stopped. George stopped. Ringo stopped. All 4 Beatles standing in the middle of a crowded subway tunnel, listening to a stranger play their music, their song, their creation, being performed by someone who had no idea they were there. And what happened in the next 20 minutes didn't just change that musician's life. It changed how the Beatles understood their own impact, their own legacy, their own responsibility to the people who loved their music enough to make it their own. But to understand why the Beatles went silent when they saw a street musician playing their song, why what happened next became one of the most profound moments of their career, you need to understand what it meant to be a struggling musician in 1965 London, and why this particular musician mattered more than any of them realized. His name was David Crawford, 23 years old, from Manchester. Came to London 2 years earlier with dreams of making it, of being discovered, of proving that talent mattered more than luck or connections or being in the right place at the right time. He'd been wrong. London didn't care about talent. London cared about who you knew, what doors were open to you, whether you fit the image record labels wanted. David didn't fit. Too raw, too honest, too real. His music came from a place of pain and hope and struggle, and record labels wanted polish, wanted perfection, wanted something that could be marketed and sold and controlled. So David played in the underground, made enough to eat, to pay rent on a tiny room in a shared flat, to survive, but not to live, not to create, not to be the musician he dreamed of becoming. He was playing other people's songs, Beatles songs, because his own didn't matter. Nobody wanted to hear original music from a nobody. They wanted familiar, safe, something that reminded them of home. That Tuesday afternoon, David was playing one of the first songs the Beatles had recorded, a song about longing, about wanting, about believing in something better. He sang it quietly, not performing, just existing, just filling the space between trains with something that wasn't silence. The 4 men in suits stopped. One of them, the shortest one with the boyish face, stepped closer, listened harder. The musician didn't notice, kept playing, eyes closed, lost in the music, lost in the only place he still felt like himself. When the song ended, the man spoke. That was beautiful. David opened his eyes, looked up, saw 4 men in expensive suits, business types, not music people. Thanks, it's not my song, it's the Beatles. I play it because it makes people happy, and happy people give coins. Paul smiled, not his public smile, his real smile, the one that came from recognition, from understanding. Do you have your own songs? Yeah, but nobody wants to hear them. People want familiar, want what they know. My songs they're too personal, too real. Record labels said they're not commercial enough. Can you play one? John asked. One of yours, not ours. Yours. David looked at these 4 strangers, confused. Why did they care? Street musicians played other people's songs. That's what survival looked like. Playing your own music was a luxury, a dream, something you did in your room when nobody was listening. I don't know if... Please, George said quietly, we want to hear what you create, not what you copy. David hesitated, then made a decision. If these strangers wanted to hear his music, he'd play it. One song, one moment of being himself instead of being a cover act. One chance to be David Crawford instead of just another street musician playing other people's dreams. He played a song he'd written 6 months earlier, about leaving home, about chasing something you can't name, about failing and trying again anyway. It wasn't polished, wasn't perfect, but it was honest, raw, real, the kind of music that comes from living instead of studying, from feeling instead of calculating. When he finished, the tunnel was quiet. Not empty, crowded, but quiet, because people had stopped, had listened, had heard something that mattered, something that felt true. Paul was crying, not obvious tears, just wet eyes, the kind that come from being moved, from hearing yourself in someone else's music, from recognizing that this young man understood exactly what they'd felt when they were starting out, when they were nobody, when they were just kids from Liverpool with guitars and dreams. That was... Paul couldn't finish, couldn't find words. Brilliant, John finished. That was absolutely brilliant. Who told you it wasn't commercial? Every record label in London, EMI, Decca, Pi, all of them, said my music was too personal, too dark, too honest. People don't want honesty. They want escapism. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Ringo said. Honesty is the only thing that lasts. Everything else is just noise. David looked at these 4 men, really looked, and suddenly, impossibly, he recognized them. The height, the way they stood, the way the shortest one had cried at his music, the way they talked about record labels and commercial viability and honesty. He couldn't say it, couldn't believe it. You're the Beatles. We are, Paul said gently, and you're David Crawford, and you're incredibly talented, and every record label that turned you down is an idiot. David's hands were shaking. I'm sorry. I was playing your song. I didn't know you were here. I wasn't trying to... Don't apologize, John interrupted. Do you know how many people play our songs? Thousands, millions probably, and most of them play them wrong, play them safe, play them like they're trying to copy us instead of understand us. But you played it right. You played it like you felt it. That's all that matters. But it's your song. I should have asked permission or... It stopped being just our song the moment we released it, George said. It became everyone's song. Your song. The song of anyone who needs it. That's what music is. It's not ownership. It's sharing. You didn't steal from us. You honored us by making our music mean something to you. Paul knelt down, eye level. David, can I ask you something? Why are you here, in this tunnel, playing for coins, when you have that kind of talent? Because talent doesn't matter. I've learned that. Talent gets you nothing. Connections matter. Luck matters. Being what people want you to be matters. And I'm not what anyone wants. You're what we want, Paul said. We want musicians who write from the heart, who aren't afraid to be honest, who create because they have to, not because they're trying to sell something. That's what we were. That's what we're trying to stay. And that's what you are. He stood up, pulled out his wallet, took out a business card, wrote something on the back, handed it to David. This is George Martin's number, our producer. Call him tomorrow. Tell him Paul McCartney sent you. Tell him we heard you play in Leicester Square station, and we think you're ready to record. He'll listen, and if he says no, which he won't, you call me. This is my direct number, on the back. Don't give it to anyone, but use it if you need it. David stared at the card. I can't. This is too much. You don't even know me. We know your music, John said. That's all we need to know. Music doesn't lie. People do. But music? Music tells you exactly who someone is. And your music tells us you're worth believing in. But what if I fail? What if George Martin hears me and says the same thing everyone else said? That I'm not commercial enough? That I'm too honest? Then he's wrong, George said simply. And you try again and again until someone says yes. That's what we did. We were rejected. A lot. Decca famously turned us down, said guitar groups were on their way out, said we had no future. And they were wrong, just like everyone who turned you down was wrong. Ringo added, the difference between failure and success isn't talent. It's not giving up. You're talented. We just heard that. Now you need to not give up. Can you do that? David looked at these four men, the biggest band in the world, standing in a subway tunnel, telling him he was good enough, giving him their producer's number, their personal numbers, believing in him when he'd stopped believing in himself. I can try. That's all we're asking, Paul said. Try. Call George Martin. Record your songs, the real ones, the honest ones, the ones that scared record labels, and see what happens. Because I'll tell you what I think will happen. I think people will hear your music and feel something. Feel understood. Feel less alone. That's what music is supposed to do. Not make people happy, make them feel. And your music makes people feel. The Beatles stayed another 15 minutes, talked to David, asked about his songs, his process, his dreams. Not as celebrities, as musicians, as people who understood what it felt like to be dismissed, to be told you're not good enough, to wonder if the dream is worth the struggle. Before they left, John said something that David never forgot. You were playing our song when we walked by, but here's the thing, it's not our song anymore. It's everyone's song, including yours. And someday someone's going to be playing your song in a subway tunnel or a pub or wherever, and you're going to hear it, and you're going to understand what we understood today. That music doesn't belong to the person who writes it. It belongs to everyone who needs it. Remember that. David called George Martin the next day, told him Paul McCartney sent him. George Martin, skeptical but curious, agreed to listen. David played 3 songs, original songs, the honest ones, the ones record labels had rejected. George Martin signed him, not to a massive deal, not to instant fame, but to a chance, an opportunity to record, to be heard, to matter. David Crawford released his first album in 1966. It didn't sell millions, didn't make him famous, but it sold enough. It mattered enough. Critics called it brutally honest and refreshingly real. One reviewer wrote, Crawford's music sounds like the Beatles if they'd never become famous. Raw, unpolished, true. He recorded 3 more albums over the next 5 years, built a small but loyal following, people who appreciated honesty over production, who wanted music that felt real instead of manufactured. He never became a household name, but he became a working musician, someone who made a living creating instead of copying, and that was enough. In 1970, the Beatles broke up. David sent Paul a letter, thanked him, told him that day in the subway had saved his life, had given him permission to be himself, had proved that talent mattered even when everyone said it didn't. Paul wrote back, a short letter, 3 sentences. Music is about connection, about making people feel less alone. You do that. Never stop. David kept that letter framed in his studio for the rest of his life. A reminder that the Beatles had seen him, had believed in him, had given him the chance he needed. Years later, in an interview, Paul was asked about that day. Do you remember David Crawford, the musician in the subway? Every detail, Paul said, because that was the moment I understood what our music meant. It wasn't just ours, it belonged to everyone. And hearing David play our song, making it his own, making it mean something personal to him, that was the highest honor. Not the sales, not the charts. That moment, when a stranger in a subway tunnel played our song and made me cry because he understood it. That's what mattered. November 1965, a street musician played a Beatles song in a London subway. And when the Beatles saw him, they went silent. Not because he was bad, because he was brilliant, because he played their song with honesty, because he reminded them why they'd started making music in the first place. For moments like that, for connection, for proving that music transcends ownership and becomes something shared, something human, something that saves people. David Crawford never became famous, but he became exactly what he wanted to be, a musician, a creator, someone whose music mattered to the people who heard it, and that was enough. Because the Beatles had taught him that success isn't about fame, it's about honesty, about creating something real, about touching people who need to be touched. That's everything. Look, if this story moved you, do me a favor. Hit that like button. We've now got 74 Beatles stories that prove music isn't about ownership. It's about sharing. It's about connection. It's about making people feel less alone. Drop a comment and let me know, has music ever saved you? Has a song ever felt like it was written just for you? Turn those notifications on, because these stories remind us what music really means. Remember, when you create something beautiful, it stops being yours. It becomes everyone's. And the Beatles understood that in a subway tunnel in 1965, when they heard their music played with honesty.